So friends, I attended Donald Trump's arraignment on his third criminal indictment. This one, his federal indictment in Washington, D.C. for his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. And at his arraignment, some interesting and even unusual things happened. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, I attended Donald Trump's third arraignment in his third criminal case in federal court in Washington, D.C. Frankly, my old stomping grounds in the courthouse where I used to try RICO cases. And I want to talk to you about how the arraignment hearing unfolded. What I saw in that courtroom. Now, I'll say I wasn't in the courtroom proper. It was a very small arraignment courtroom, but they broadcast with 4 cameras everything that went on in that courtroom to an overflow courtroom. So I was in the overflow courtroom, but I had a real-time bird's eye view of how the arraignment played out. And I want to talk to you about what I saw, my impressions of what I saw, and I want to highlight 3 things in particular. But let's start with Donald Trump's entrance. He just kind of lumbered in, almost shuffled in, wearing his sort of typically unusually bright blue suit with a white shirt and the red tie that is always too long. Frankly, I always think of those red rolls of licorice that I used to get as a kid. You would unroll it and eat it, and it was a really long red roll. I don't think Donald Trump has ever found a competent tailor. So he kind of lumbered in and sat down at counsel table. He didn't interact with anybody. He didn't talk with anybody. He certainly didn't look directly at anybody, not at Jack Smith, special counsel, who's prosecuting him. But Jack Smith seemed to kind of be locked on Donald Trump like a laser beam, literally and figuratively. And then the proceeding got underway. Now, a magistrate judge presided over this proceeding, not the assigned judge, Judge Tanya Chutkin, who I'll talk about in a minute. It is entirely usual for a magistrate judge, a lower level judge, to handle preliminary hearings in a case, like an arraignment hearing. The magistrate judge explained to the defendant the 4 charges, the 4 counts on which he had been indicted. Donald Trump predictably entered a plea of not guilty. And then there are 3 things that played out, some of which were pretty unusual in my experience, having handled countless arraignments over my 30 years as a prosecutor. And I want to sort of talk through the more unusual aspects of the arraignment hearing. So the first was, even though a magistrate judge presided over these hearings, the specter of Judge Tanya Chutkin, the assigned judge, sort of permeated the proceedings, hung over the courtroom. Here's why I say that. Ordinarily, during an arraignment hearing, the magistrate judge will say to the parties, all right, I'm going to set a status hearing about 30 days down the road, and I'm going to ask the parties, the prosecution and the defense, to bring their calendars, bring their trial schedules to the next status hearing, and we'll begin to talk about setting a trial date. That's not the way it played out in this arraignment hearing. The magistrate judge said, I've consulted with Judge Chutkin, and here is what she wants done. Prosecutors, you will file a brief with the court in 7 days, setting out your proposed trial date and informing the court how long you think your case in chief will last. Case in chief being the amount of time that the prosecution will need to present its evidence. She then turned to the defense. Defense attorney, you will file a brief with the court 7 days after the government files its brief, so 14 days from now. You will set out your proposed trial date and about how long you think the defense case will take to present. Then we will reassemble. Actually, you will appear before Judge Chutkin on August 28th, 25 days from now, and Judge Chutkin will set a trial date. All of that was a little bit more definitive than is usual in an arraignment hearing. What that made clear is that Judge Chutkin is prepared to set a trial date on August 28th, and I have a feeling it will be a speedy trial date. Now let me say as an aside, I know Judge Tanya Chutkin. I know her primarily from the time we used to try murder cases against one another across the street from Federal District Court in the Superior Court for the District of Columbia. Because you see, for about a decade, she was a public defender in the District of Columbia. I was an assistant United States attorney at the DC U.S. Attorney's Office trying murder cases, prosecuting homicide cases, and we had some murder cases against each other. And I went to trial against then defense counsel Tanya Chutkin, now Judge Chutkin. And what I can tell you about Judge Chutkin is that she is a smart, strong, tactically savvy, fierce, fearless defense attorney. She also is honest, honorable, ethical, trustworthy, and frankly, a pleasure to try a case against. I always enjoyed trying cases against not only good, accomplished defense attorneys, but honorable and trustworthy defense attorneys. I don't always say it was a pleasure to try a case against a particular defense attorney. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. But I enjoyed and appreciated the work of defense attorney Tanya Chutkin. She then went into private practice for a few years, and about a decade ago, she was appointed to the federal bench in Washington, D.C. by President Barack Obama. And she is a tough, no-nonsense, accomplished jurist. And I think what I would say about her is what I would say about any judge who is smart, no nonsense, doesn't suffer fools. Judge Chutkin don't play. And I think Donald Trump and his defense team have met their match in Judge Tanya Chutkin. In many ways, she seems to be the anti-Judge Aileen Cannon, the Trump-appointed judge on the documents case down in Florida, who the appellate court said abused her discretion in favor of Donald Trump and was reversed for it. So Judge Chutkin is an excellent draw for Donald Trump's Washington, D.C. criminal prosecution. That was one interesting thing. Now, when the magistrate judge told the defense counsel, you will submit a brief to the court with a proposed trial date, the defense counsel, a guy named John Lauro, complained incessantly, went there 3 times, I think, with his complaining and his whining. Judge, we can't possibly set a trial date or propose a trial date because, goodness gracious, we have no idea how much discovery, how much evidence the government will provide to us, how much we're going to have to pour through, how much time we're going to need. We can't possibly propose a trial date. And after hearing him and indulging him, the magistrate judge said, I hear you. You will propose a trial date in the brief that you file with the court 14 days from now. During his complaining, the defense attorney, John Lauro, said something that I have never in 30 years prosecuting cases heard a defense attorney say in or out of court. Here's what he said. This comes from page 14 of the transcript. I have since obtained a copy of the transcript, but when he said this, I was sitting in court and my pulse quickened and I rose to anger and I was trying to furiously take down verbatim contemporaneous notes because I'd never heard anything like this. I'm glad I now have a transcript. Fortunately, my contemporaneous notes were largely accurate. On page 14 of the transcript, here's what he says. Thank you, Your Honor. Obviously, in a case of this magnitude, there might be a massive amount of discovery and information that we would have to look through in order to make that determination, a proposed trial date. We expect to vigorously address every single issue in this matter on behalf of Mr. Trump and on behalf of the American people. On behalf of the American people, who do you think you represent, sport? You represent the interests of the defendant solely and exclusively. You know full well, because I think you used to be a prosecutor, you don't represent the interests of the American people. You don't raise issues on behalf of the American people. That's what the prosecutors do. That's what I did for 30 years. That is misleading. It's a mischaracterization. It's borderline disinformation, if not outright propaganda. What did he try to do there? To what level did he stoop? You know what he was trying to do there. How many times recently have you heard Donald Trump spit out this nonsense? They're not coming after me. They're coming after you. They're not prosecuting me. They're prosecuting you. Of course, that's nonsense. They're prosecuting Donald Trump for his crimes. They're not prosecuting others for those crimes, but Donald Trump is trying to whip up anger and resentment and a sense that somehow the fact that the Department of Justice, that federal prosecutors, that special counsel has brought charges against Donald Trump is somehow an indictment or a slight of Donald Trump's supporters. Unfortunately, we've come to expect that from Donald Trump, but I did not in a million years expect any criminal defense attorney to stoop to the level of mimicking or parroting that in court. We'll be raising issues on behalf of the American people. No, you won't. And I actually wrote in my notes, shut your mouth. I was angry because that's not the role of any criminal defense attorney. And he knows it, and he has stooped to his client's level, and he is trying to whip up anger just the way his client does. I hope he's taken to task for that. I hope there's an ethics complaint filed with his state bar for that. I hope Judge Tanya Chutkin, either on or before August 28th, tells him, you will put that trick back into your trick bag and you will not pull it out again because you don't represent or raise issues on behalf of the American people, and you know it. You know better. Don't stoop to your client's level. So yes, that got me angry. It got me exercised. It got me agitated. And I hope that the judge puts a stop to it. And friends, the magistrate judge also put Donald Trump on notice of his conditions of release, what he must do and what he must refrain from doing. Here is what the magistrate judge told him. Your most important condition of release, sir, is that you not commit a state, federal, or local crime while on release. If you were to do so, again, a warrant may be issued for your arrest, your conditions of release may be revoked, and you may be held pending trial in this case. You may also face a longer sentence for having committed a crime while on release in this case. In a moment, I will set the next court date in this matter. It is important, Mr. Trump, that you appear for that court date and all future court dates set in this case unless the district judge orders otherwise. Failure to do so may result in a warrant being issued for your arrest, your conditions of release being revoked, and you being held pending trial in this case. You may also face an additional criminal charge for for failure to appear in court. And friends, here comes the important part. Finally, sir, I want to remind you that it is a crime to try to influence a juror or to threaten or attempt to bribe a witness or any other person who may have information about your case, or to retaliate against anyone for providing information about your case to the prosecution, or to otherwise obstruct the administration of justice. Do you understand these warnings and consequences, sir? And Trump, the defendant, said, yes. And friends, not 24 hours after the magistrate judge put the defendant on these conditions of release, these restrictions, these prohibitions, not to influence a juror, not to threaten a witness, not to retaliate against anyone, not to obstruct justice, what did Donald Trump just post? If you go after me, I'm coming after you. So it looks like Donald Trump may have already violated his conditions of release. You know, friends, for a long time, I have been advocating that Donald Trump should be detained pending trial. The law provides that if there's clear and convincing evidence that a defendant who is pending trial poses a danger to the community or is a flight risk, but in this case, poses a danger to the community, he is to be detained pending trial. Donald Trump has just upped the ante because not only is he clearly and convincingly a danger to the community, he has now also violated the conditions of release that were placed on him less than 24 hours ago by the magistrate judge. I suspect Judge Tanya Chutkin is going to have a little something to say about that. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.